My ex-wife saw a woman leave my apartment at sunrise, and I already knew the exact second the door clicked shut behind Claire that this was going to cost me something. I'm David, 38, divorced 2 years, the kind of man who hugs people hello and texts his female friends bad jokes at midnight, and that easy warmth is the very thing that once made my ex-wife accuse me of cheating with her own sister. It wasn't true. It was never true. But she believed it anyway, and it ended us. So when that woman left my apartment at sunrise and my ex-wife happened to be standing in the lobby holding our daughter's science project, I braced for the fight I was certain was coming. But she didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She knocked on my door an hour later, looked at me the way she used to when she was reading the truth off my face before I'd said a single word, and said 7 quiet words that undid me completely. I know exactly what that look on your face means. And when I asked her how, after 2 years, after everything, after the accusation that burned our marriage to the ground, she still remembered that look on my face well enough to read it from 30 feet away. The answer she gave me wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous. So, what did that look on my face actually mean? And why did the woman who once accused me of betrayal suddenly seem grateful to see it again? Who was the woman who left my apartment at sunrise? And why would my ex-wife, of all people, knock an hour later just to tell me she understood? And how does a man walk back toward the wife he lost without losing everything a second time? The knock came at 9 in the morning, not the soft, apologetic kind. The kind that means someone has already made up their mind before their knuckles ever touch the wood. I still had my coffee mug in my hand. It was warm. My hand was not. I opened the door, already rehearsing my defense, already building the wall, because 2 years of marriage had taught me exactly what that knock usually meant. Naomi standing there with her arms crossed. Naomi standing there with fire behind her eyes. Naomi standing there, ready to burn something down again. Instead, she was just still. She had Mia's volcano project tucked under one arm, the papier-mâché one we'd built together back when we were still a family that built things together. Her eyes weren't angry. They were doing something worse. They were reading me. I was dropping off Mia's science project, she said. I was in the lobby. She walked right past me. I felt my stomach drop through the floor of my own apartment. 2 years ago, this exact sentence would have been the opening line of a war. I would have spent the next hour defending myself for a crime I never committed, explaining, again, that warmth is not betrayal, that a hug is not an affair, that loving people easily does not mean loving her less. But Naomi didn't raise her voice. She just looked at me the way you look at a photograph you haven't seen in years, like something in it surprised you, even though you knew exactly what was in the frame. I know exactly what that look on your face means, she said. 7 words. That's all it took to knock the air clean out of my chest. What look? I asked, even though some part of me already knew. Some part of me had felt it on my own face an hour earlier, walking Claire to the elevator, watching the doors close on her tired, soft, sunrise smile. The one you're wearing right now, Naomi said. The one you had this morning when you walked her out. You had it every single morning for the first 2 years we were together. I'd know that look anywhere, David. I spent 6 years memorizing it. I stood in my own doorway, holding a coffee mug that had gone completely cold in my hand, and I asked her the only question that made any sense to ask. How do you still remember? She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone standing at the edge of something they used to own. Because I spent 6 years memorizing it, she said, and then I spent 2 years trying to forget it. To understand why those words hit me like a car crash, you have to understand what actually killed my marriage. Because it wasn't cheating. I need you to hear that clearly, because everyone who knew us assumed otherwise. I never touched another woman while I was married to Naomi. Not once, not close. What killed us was smaller than betrayal, and somehow crueler, because it had no ending point. No single moment you could point to and say, there, that's the wound. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. I've always been the kind of man who hugs people hello, who remembers birthdays that aren't mine to remember, who sends stupid memes to female coworkers at midnight because I can't sleep, and I like making people laugh. It never once occurred to me that this was dangerous. To me, it was just how I loved the world. A little, in every direction, in the ordinary way that makes life less lonely. To Naomi, it was a slow-motion betrayal she watched happen in real time and could never quite prove, and could never quite stop believing in. It started small. A comment about how fast I replied to my friend Priya's texts compared to hers. A joke, not really a joke, about how I lit up more for other women than I did for my own wife. I laughed it off. God, I laughed it off so many times. And every single time I did, I taught her that her fear wasn't allowed to exist out loud in our house. The night it finally broke us wasn't even about a stranger. It was about her own sister. We were at Zainab's birthday barbecue. Smoke curling up off the grill. Kids screaming in the backyard. Someone's terrible playlist rattling out of a Bluetooth speaker balanced on a lawn chair. Zainab and I were laughing about something stupid. I don't even remember what anymore. And I put my hand on her shoulder the way I put my hand on anyone's shoulder when I laugh too hard to stand up straight. I didn't see Naomi on the porch. I didn't see her face change color like a storm rolling in behind her eyes. I found out that night, in the car, in a silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my ribs, right before she said the words I never thought I'd hear come out of her mouth. "Are you sleeping with my sister?" I want to tell you I handled it with grace. I didn't. I was so blindsided, so insulted, that instead of asking her where that fear was coming from, instead of sitting in the pain with her, I got defensive. I told her she was being insane. I told her she needed help. I said the kind of things a man says when he cares more about being right than being kind. And by the time I realized what I'd done, something in her had already closed, like a door slamming shut in the wind. We tried counseling. 8 months of it. It helped, some. I learned that her fear didn't actually start with me. It started with a 9-year-old girl watching her father walk out the door with a suitcase and a lie about a business trip, and never really coming home the same man again. I learned that being technically faithful is not the same thing as making someone feel safe. That you can be innocent and still be careless with somebody's whole heart. But understanding a wound and healing a wound run on 2 completely different clocks, and ours ran out of time. We divorced when our daughter, Mia, was 4 years old. Naomi kept the house. I got a 2-bedroom apartment 11 minutes away, a coffee mug that never seemed to stay warm long enough, and a standing arrangement, Wednesdays, every other weekend, that made my chest ache every single time I dropped our little girl back off at a house I used to call mine. That was 2 years ago. 2 years of rebuilding, slowly, carefully, learning how to be a good father in pieces instead of whole days. 2 years of telling myself the ache would fade eventually, the way every ache is supposed to. And then Claire walked into my life so quietly I almost didn't notice it happening. She worked 2 floors below me. For 4 straight months, our entire relationship was a shared elevator ride and complaints about the office coffee machine. She was patient in a way I wasn't used to. Not patient like she was waiting for a better version of me to show up, but patient like she already liked exactly who I was. No performance required. I told her about the divorce on our 3rd date. I told her everything. The accusation, the fights, the ending that came from something that was never even true. She didn't flinch. When I finished, she said something I've replayed in my head 100 times since. "That doesn't sound like she didn't trust you," Claire said. "It sounds like she didn't trust herself to be enough. That's not something reassurance fixes. That has to heal from the inside." I didn't fully understand what she meant. Not until Naomi was standing in my doorway with a papier-mâché volcano in her arms, reading a look off my face that apparently never actually changed, no matter who was standing on the other side of it. Claire had stayed over the night before for the most unromantic reason imaginable. We'd spent hours helping her sister move apartments across town, and by 1 in the morning, driving her home made less sense than her crashing on my couch. Nothing happened beyond exhaustion and a movie neither of us finished. Her head landed on my shoulder somewhere around the 2nd act. My arm went completely numb. I didn't move it anyway. In the morning, she made both of us coffee in my French press she still hasn't figured out how to use properly, and I walked her to the elevator, the way I always walk people to the elevator. And I must have looked at her the way a man looks at someone he's falling for, because apparently that look doesn't change depending on who's standing in front of you. Naomi saw it from 30 feet across the lobby, and she knew exactly what it was. Because once, a long time ago, before the barbecue, before the accusation, before the divorce, that look had belonged entirely to her. Standing in my doorway an hour later, coffee mug cold in my hand, I had no idea that Naomi hadn't come to accuse me of anything at all. I had no idea she'd come to hand me the truth instead. A truth that was about to reopen a door I thought I'd nailed shut 2 years ago, and that once it opened, neither of us would be able to close it again without losing something we couldn't afford to lose. I just stood there, staring at the woman who used to be my whole world, and asked the only question left in me. Why are you really here, Naomi? She looked past me, into the apartment, at the empty second coffee cup still sitting on the counter. Because I owe you something, she said quietly, that I should have given you 2 years ago, and I almost let you walk away without ever hearing it. Naomi stepped into my apartment like she was walking into a memory she wasn't sure she still had permission to enter. She set the volcano down on my kitchen counter, next to the empty coffee cup Claire had left behind, and for a second her eyes lingered on it, not with anger, with something closer to grief. I've been in therapy, she said, real therapy, not the kind we did together at the end, trying to save something that needed one of us to become a different person first. Individual therapy. Over a year now. I didn't say anything. I just listened, because some part of me knew that if I interrupted, she'd lose the courage it had clearly taken her weeks to build. I found out something about myself, David. Her hands were shaking slightly, the way they used to, right before she'd say something she'd been holding in too long. The accusation. Your sister. I mean my sister, Zainab. That whole night. It was never really about you. Naomi. Let me finish, please. Her voice cracked on the word please, and something in my chest cracked right along with it. When I was 9, my dad left for what he called a business trip. He came back 4 days later, and he was still my dad, technically. Same face, same voice, but something in him had gone somewhere and never fully come home. I found out years later there'd been another woman. Not an affair, exactly. Something smaller. Something that still broke my mother in half anyway. I felt the floor of my understanding shift beneath me. In 6 years of marriage, she had never told me this. Not once. I didn't know that, I said quietly. I know you didn't. I never let you know it. Because if I told you where the fear came from, I'd have to admit, it wasn't really about you at all. It was about a 9-year-old girl who's been waiting her whole life for the other shoe to drop. And you, her voice broke again. You were just an easy person to blame, because you were warm, and open, and loved people easily, and some sick part of me decided that made you dangerous. The apartment went completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding somewhere behind my ribs. I made you pay, she whispered, for a debt that was never yours. I set my coffee mug down on the counter because my hand had started shaking too much to hold it steady. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why today? Of all days. She looked toward the door, toward the hallway where Claire had disappeared 20 minutes earlier without either of them exchanging a single word. Because I saw the way you looked at her, David. And instead of feeling that old jealousy clawing up my throat, the thing I used to feel every single time you so much as smiled at another woman, I felt grateful. I felt happy for you. And that's how I knew I was finally healed enough to say this out loud, before it stopped mattering, before you moved on completely, and I lost the chance to make this right. I stood there in my own kitchen, staring at the woman I had built a marriage, a daughter, and an entire decade of memory with, and I felt something crack open in my chest that I had sealed shut 2 years ago, out of pure survival. Thank you, I finally said, for coming here, for telling me that. She nodded, blinking fast, and reached for the door like she was about to leave. Like this had been a closed transaction, an apology delivered and received, nothing more required of either of us. But I want you to understand something about that moment, because it's the moment everything changed. I wish I could tell you I let her walk out that door in peace. I didn't. Because standing there watching her hand close around the doorknob, I felt a single question rise up in me that I hadn't let myself ask in 2 full years. What if I never actually stopped loving her? I didn't say it out loud. Not that day. I let her leave, thanked her again at the door, and told myself it was just old grief resurfacing, the kind that ambushes you on anniversaries and empty Tuesday mornings. I told myself Claire was real, and good, and steady, and that whatever this feeling was, it would pass. It didn't pass. For 3 weeks, it grew. I'd be at dinner with Claire, watching her tell a story with her hands the way she always does, genuinely happy across the table from her. And some traitor part of my brain would drift, without permission, to the sound of Naomi's laugh at Mia's 5th birthday party. To 6 years of history, with a woman who had finally understood what had broken us. It wasn't that I loved Claire less, it was that Naomi's apology had kicked open a box I had taped shut and labeled, "Do not open," and I hadn't realized how much unfinished business was still sitting inside it. Claire noticed before I did. She always noticed everything before I did. "You've been somewhere else for weeks," she said one night, not accusing, just watching me the way she watches everything, carefully, honestly. "Is it her?" I didn't lie. I owed her more than a lie. "I think so. I think talking to her again stirred up something I hadn't actually finished dealing with. I'm sorry, Claire. That's not fair to you." She was quiet for a long moment, turning her mug slowly in her hands. "You know," she finally said, "I think I noticed it before you did. You're a wonderful man, David. I've had a genuinely good few months with you. But there's a version of you that shows up when you talk about Mia, when her mother's name comes up. A version that's more whole than the one I usually get. I used to think it was old grief. Now I think it's something you never actually let finish. Claire, I'm not angry," she said, and I believed her, because she wasn't the kind of woman who said things she didn't mean. "I'd rather know now than spend a year finding out the same thing the hard way. You don't owe me a version of yourself that isn't sure, and I refuse to be the reason you never find out what is." We ended it gently that night. No shouting, no blame. 2 people parting ways because one of them had grown toward a truth neither of them wanted to see coming. I've thought of her often since, with nothing but gratitude, hoping that wherever she is now, someone gets to watch her tell stories with her hands and knows exactly how lucky they are. But I let her go, and 4 days later, I found out I might have let go of the wrong thing entirely. I called Naomi to talk. Really talk this time. Not doorway talk, not volcano project talk. She didn't pick up. I called again the next day. Nothing. It was Mia who told me why. Over pancakes that Saturday morning, swinging her feet under the table like she was announcing the most casual news in the world. "Mommy's moving," she said. "She got a new job. In Denver. She said we're gonna visit Grandma more, 'cause it's closer." I felt something drop straight through the floor of my chest. "When did this happen, Bug?" "I don't know. She said it real fast, like this week." I called Naomi's sister that afternoon, Zainab, who still texted me the same terrible jokes she always had, divorce or not, and she confirmed every word. A job offer Naomi had been sitting on for months, quietly, privately, and had finally accepted 3 days earlier. A moving truck already booked for the following month. "She didn't want to tell you until it was final," Zainab admitted, sounding uncomfortable, like she was betraying a secret she'd promised to keep. She said, "David, don't be mad at me for saying this." She said she needed to leave before she talked herself into hoping for something that wasn't hers to hope for anymore. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd once braced for a fight that never came, and I understood, all at once, exactly what Naomi had done. She hadn't come to my door that morning to win me back. She had come to set me free, cleanly, honestly, without asking for anything in return. And when she watched me choose someone else, she had quietly decided to build a brand new life, 1,000 miles away, rather than risk becoming the woman who broke up my happiness a second time. She was trying to let me go with dignity. And sitting there with my coffee going cold for the second time in 1 week, I finally understood that I didn't want her to. I didn't call her this time. I drove. 40 minutes across town, past the coffee shop where we had our first real date, past the park where Mia learned to ride a bike without training wheels, past every landmark of a life we'd already lived once, and I was suddenly terrified of losing the chance to live again. My hands stayed tight on the wheel the entire way. Knuckles pale, heart pounding louder than the radio I never even turned on. Her house, the one that used to be ours, the one I still sometimes drove past out of habit, had moving boxes stacked along the hallway when she opened the door. Surprise flooded her face, quick and unguarded, before she could catch it and pull it back behind something more careful. "David, what are you—" "I broke up with Claire," I said, because I'd promised myself the whole drive over that I wasn't going to waste a single second circling the truth. 3 weeks ago, not because of anything she did wrong, because talking to you again made me realize I never actually finished loving you. I just stopped, mid-sentence, because it hurt too much to keep going. Naomi stood very still in that doorway, the same doorway she'd once stood in mine, holding a volcano and a truth I wasn't ready for, and I watched a dozen things move across her face at once. Shock, disbelief, something dangerously close to hope, and then, fast, like a door slamming shut on instinct, caution. "David, I have a job. I have a truck coming in 3 weeks. I can't just—" "I'm not asking you to cancel anything," I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. "I'm asking you to know something true before you go. The same way you thought I deserved to know something true before I moved on completely. I'm not the man who got defensive at that barbecue, instead of asking where your fear came from. And you're not the woman who needed me to prove something every single day just to feel safe. We spent all this time apart, becoming the exact people who might actually be able to do this right. It feels like a waste to let a moving truck decide we never even get to find out." Her eyes filled, and she let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "The same one from my kitchen weeks earlier. You're telling me this now? After I already accepted the job?" "I'm telling you this now because I finally understand what that look on my face actually meant. Every single time you saw it. It was never really about who I was looking at. It's just what I look like when I let myself hope. And apparently, some part of me has never fully stopped hoping it might be you." She didn't answer right away. She stepped out onto the porch instead, pulled the door shut behind her so Mia wouldn't wake and wander into the middle of whatever this was, and stood close enough that I could see her hands were trembling again, the exact way they had trembled in my kitchen. "I don't want to do this wrong a second time," she whispered. "I don't want you to be a decision I make because I'm scared of Denver, or lonely, or—" "Then don't decide anything today," I said. "Take the job if it's the right job for you. Move if you need to move. I'm not here to talk you out of your own life. I'm here because I spent 2 years thinking I'd closed a door, and it turns out I'd just walked away and left it standing wide open the whole time. I think some part of both of us has been living in that gap ever since. I'd like to actually try this time. Slowly. Honestly. However far apart it has to happen." The wind moved through the trees along her street, carrying the smell of cut grass and someone's grill 3 houses down. An ordinary Saturday morning, going on completely unaware that it was the most important morning of my life. Naomi looked at me for a long time, longer than any silence I could remember between us, and then she did something I never expected. She reached out and took my hand, not desperately, not like someone drowning, like someone finally allowed to hold on to something they'd spent 2 years telling themselves they didn't deserve anymore. "Okay," she said. "Okay, slowly. I want to be honest with you about what happened next. Because this isn't a story about somebody dropping their whole life the second the right person shows up on their porch. That would be easy. That would be a lie." Naomi didn't cancel the truck. She moved to Denver 7 weeks later, exactly as planned. And I stood in an airport terminal watching her walk through security with a duffel bag over one shoulder, wondering if I'd just watched the best thing in my life disappear through a metal detector. But I flew out to see her the very first weekend I could, and the weekend after that. And slowly, deliberately, the way you rebuild something after a fire, checking every beam, testing every wall, before you trust it to hold weight again. We built something new out of the wreckage of something old. Video calls every night at 9. Mia splitting her summers between two cities that somehow, impossibly, both started to feel like home to her. 6 months of two people relearning each other without the fear that used to sit between us like a third person in every room we ever stood in together. I told her the truth every single time there was a truth to tell. When a coworker hugged me at a farewell party, I mentioned it before she could ever hear it secondhand from someone else. Not because I owed her a confession. I finally understood that safety isn't something you demand from another person. It's something you build for them, one small, unglamorous honesty at a time, brick by brick, until the walls hold on their own. And she, for her part, stopped needing me to prove anything. Somewhere in that year of distance and therapy and hard-won trust, she learned to sit with her own fear instead of handing it to me like a weapon and asking me to diffuse it. We got married again on a Tuesday afternoon at a county courthouse, 16 months after she'd first opened her door holding our daughter's volcano project, and told me she knew exactly what my face meant. No big ceremony, no guest list, just the two of us, Mia in a yellow dress swinging her legs on the courthouse bench, and Zainab crying into a tissue behind us the entire time, the same way she'd cried at our first wedding, 12 years earlier, when none of us had any idea what was coming. That night, in a new kitchen, in a new house we picked out together, in a city neither of us had grown up in, but had somehow both learned to call home, I caught Naomi watching me while I made pancakes badly, the same way I've always made them badly. "What?" I asked. "That look," she said, smiling. "You've got it right now. What does it mean this time?" She crossed the kitchen, took the spatula gently out of my hand, and kissed me the way she used to, before either of us learned how to be afraid of one another. "It means you're happy," she whispered. "And this time, I don't have to wonder if I'm the reason why. I already know. And that's the truth I want to leave you with tonight. Love doesn't always end where it breaks. Sometimes it just goes quiet for a while, waiting for two people to become brave enough, honest enough, healed enough, to find their way back to each other without repeating the same mistakes that pulled them apart the first time. So, let me ask you something before you go. If someone from your past looked at you today and saw the exact same look on your face that they memorized years ago, what do you think they would understand about you, that you still haven't said out loud to anyone? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story moved you even a little tonight, don't let it be the last one that does. Subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you never miss the next story about the love we lose, the love we fight for, and the love that finds its way home.